Hey guys, and welcome back to the Mado Videos podcast by Guch. This is episode 33. Today's guest is Adam Harder. He's a video producer at DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is a hosting platform, like web hosting platform, and offers a lot of other things other than that. But something that is very interesting is DigitalOcean as a brand has been doing a lot of work, or a lot of their communication through the medium of videos. And other than that, I think Adam himself has close to 9+ years of experience, just under a decade of experience doing videos, right from his background in journalism. He's got some interesting stories to tell from his times with the US Air Force and a couple of other companies that he's worked from. And So with that, I think I'll add Adam to the stream, and then maybe we can start chatting about a lot of other things. Welcome, Adam. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Super. Uh, all right. I think I did a very quick round of introduction. I think I did not do justice to all the experience that you bring to the table. So before we start our conversation, would you like to give us a little more about yourself, where you come from, and how you've reached where you're doing what you're doing today?
Sure, absolutely. So as you noted, I've been in the industry now for almost 10 years, which is hard to believe. I started when I was 20 years old. We were talking right before this stream about how I was a broadcast journalism undergrad in college back in a place called Kent, Ohio, which is a very small place. It has actually reputation. It's called Can't, Ohio, because you can't really do much if you live there, so you need to escape, and that's what. Luckily, that's what I had done. Joined the U.S. Air Force when I was 20 years old
Yeah.
as a broadcast journalist, which was in line with what I was studying, and yeah, basically, I auditioned for the part of being a broadcast journalist. You have to audition to get that job in the military. And
Yeah.
luckily, I did. And the first place they sent me was Guam, in the Southern Pacific, the island of Guam, and
Yeah.
which was actually incredible. It was very beautiful. And I worked for basically an Air Force public affairs agency out there, doing all sorts of different sort of mission driven stories. So if there were, particular military exercises or rescue operations. I would be reporting sometimes literally from like the side of helicopters with a microphone and a camera, or it would be like that extreme, or we would be doing things like travel shows to Saipan, and it was very fun. So it was a very cool mixture that really got to uh, broaden like really just build the foundation of good production. And then when I went to Korea after that, I was in Korea for a year for the Air Force, and that is where I feel like I really honed in my storytelling because we had, quite frankly, more time to hone in the craft. There's not a whole lot to do in the middle of the peninsula of Korea when you're in the U.S. Air Force, so just got a lot of time to make stories better. And I think we'll actually see one of those stories later. Which, preface: I was 22 years old at the time, so bear with me. That was a long time ago. And then after that, I went and worked for the U.S. Air Force and did some operations for NATO as well in Belgium for a few years, like 3 years, doing all sorts of same thing, sort of really like mission driven storytelling, but also like mini documentaries. And then ran sort of a news station out there for Benelux, which stands for Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. And then I got out of the Air Force after 6 years. My contract was up, and I went and moved to Washington, D.C., where I currently reside. Worked for a company called 2U, doing production for them. It was very like education based production for students. Um, it was fun, but it was very exhausting. I had to travel all the time. It was very hands on, heavy production. And so I left that job and came to DigitalOcean, where I currently lead the video team. And now I basically oversee all of our video marketing initiatives for this company. So it's an amazing job, and I love it.
No, I mean it's very interesting because I think you've been using the medium of videos right from the start. I think you're one of the very few people that I've met who has been exposed to the medium right from the start of their careers. And Most of the people, I mean, I've been talking to on the podcast, they are from a different background, and they've been adapting to the medium of video. So I think it would be very interesting to chat with you, because we'll also I think have a perspective on how the whole process of video production has evolved, and how it was 10 years back and how it is now. So with
Yeah.
that said, uh, with that said, I'll ask my first question, like I ask every guest on the show. Why is Adam mad over videos? I think you sort of answered it somewhere down the line in your previous answer, but then I'd like to ask you this: why is Adam mad over videos?
Sure. So the reason that I'm mad over videos, and I guess if you really stripped it down to its basics, the reason that I've always been mad over videos, the reason that I've been in video since I first had a professional job as an adult, is the humanization of the industry, right? Like when I was a kid and I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I guess it always came back to just talking to humans and getting to know people and connecting with others. And that is what video does at its core, right? Like, if even and it might not seem like it at first, but the reason that I'm mad over videos is because whether it's the editing, the production, the interviews, the captivating emotional storytelling that keeps viewers wanting more, it is always about connection. That's really at its core what makes good video. And
Yeah.
if you're doing it right, you're always going to have friends in the industry, and people are going to admire your work the same way that they admire art when they go to a museum. They feel a connection to it. That is
Mhm.
why I'm mad over videos.
Awesome. Like you said, I think an interesting point that I take away from what you just mentioned is your journalism background, right? You studied journalism, and in fact, journalists make for great marketers. Proof in I mean is in the pudding. I just happened to hire a marketer on my team at Guch, and she's somebody who's pursuing her master's in journalism. So again, like it's a very different perspective. I mean, typical marketers are. I mean, I've seen a lot of marketers in India. There are engineers who then do their MBAs and then get into marketing. There are commerce graduates who get into marketing. But a journalism background is something which is very unique. They like to share stories as is. They are very much focused on researching the subject. So this is something which is very, very interesting to me. I'd like to hear how your experience or how your education in journalism has helped you in your experience.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say I couldn't agree more with you. I think you hiring somebody who has a journalism background is it's very smart, and it's very smart for you're basically just widening your ability to connect with your audiences in inherent ways that you might not even see at first, but over time it will build. Like, I actually have talked to a lot of my broadcast journalism colleagues from the past, and I've been honest with them. Like, there's a really good opportunity to work in marketing because inherently the skills that you're taught as a journalist
Hmm.
align with everything marketers really want to do. What does a marketer want to do? Truly, what does a marketer want to do at its core? A marketer wants to connect with their audiences and encourage them to buy a product, right? That's what marketers do. And a journalist's inherent ability is to take messaging and connect it to a viewer. You couldn't really have a closer marrying of professions, right? It's just that you go about them in two very different ways. And if you can bridge that gap, you are like, your brand can just really, really I don't want to use the word profit, but it can really benefit from that, right? And so I would say uh, the connection that I've seen in the past with this, and that I'm definitely seeing now, is that, as something we talked about right before the interview, right? It's when you sit in marketing meetings, right? If somebody's watching this right now, if somebody's in marketing and they're watching this video right now, think about the last marketing meeting you were in, right? And you thought you wanted to make a campaign about that new product or about that new website update or whatever it may be. And you're like, okay, how can we get audiences to be captivated by this? Very, very often that conversation goes, well, we want to tell the story through our users. We want to tell the story through our customers because that's going to show that we're an authentic brand, right? Why should we say it when our customers can say it for us? Because that's very authentic.
Yeah.
And it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It truly is. So they think what where marketers, I find from the broadcasting perspective, tend to get it a little bit wrong is that
Yeah.
they'll take that bit, they're off to a good start, but they'll take that bit and they'll say, okay, this marketer spends a lot of money with us. We should do them. That's not a story, right? If you're trying to connect with your audiences, you need to be coming from the heart. You need to aim for the heart. And you need to start with what story matters? What can our customers relate to? Where is their empathy? Just because they spent a lot of money doesn't mean it's a story, right? Like, so you kind of go with like, you have to reverse engineer the story, and that's where you take the journalistic approach of, okay, which of our customers use our product in an inspiring way? Which of our customers took a risk, overcame adversity, and our product helped them get there? When they tell their story, we don't have to mix their messaging. We don't have to make them say, oh my gosh, Gush is the best, Gush or DigitalOcean is the best product ever, and I love it so much, because that sounds fake, right? But if they say, I really wanted to scale my business and we just didn't have a good video solution to do so, and Gush honestly helped us get there by streamlining A, B, and C, and without it, we wouldn't have been able to solve for this and we wouldn't be here now. That sounds real. And that really is a journalistic approach. You're just finding the right people to tell the story, but you cannot change their messaging and you cannot force them to say something that they don't want to say. You just have to find the right people and do good work so that people actually want to say these things about you. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of marketers out there should take note of what you just said, because a lot of them try and force feed like brand offerings, etc. in these stories. And success stories are not about the brand; it's about the success of the customer. And you're always the side hero in the film, so you have to accept the fact and go about it that way. But I mean, I also like to talk about the point of the fact that the medium of videos generally has a higher payoff and an impact over other medium. I think you have a bunch of I think the marketing team at DigitalOcean is solid. I think they have everybody right from like paid advertising. You have folks in SEO, you have SEM and whatnot, content marketers. But I think as a video producer, what is your perspective of the benefits of video as a medium and a choice of communication over the rest of the medium?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm going to try to say this in the least biased way possible, right? But video has shelf life, video is evergreen, video makes an impact and impression, right? And like, you think about what are some of the, you could ask anybody whether in video or not, what are some of the most impactful marketing campaigns they've ever seen? I'll name a few that are pretty popular in the United States, like the Dove campaign for like women's body image, right? Like, I would say another one would be like, actually one I saw in India was a Google Maps campaign that stayed with me for years, because this gentleman found his mother via Google Maps. And it was just like, those stayed with me, but I couldn't tell you a still image, like graphic design campaign that ever stayed with me. I could think about like logos that were cool, but I couldn't think about a blog post that I read, or and not to say there's anything wrong with those. Those are good because they have a place, right? They solve particular issues sometimes, or they make your brand look good, but the video ones stay with you in your head and your heart. And I think that's why it's always going to be a good investment. The thing about video though, is it's not easy, right? It's big, it's expensive, it takes time. But it's what you do when you're for real. You know what I mean? Like when you roll out the idea of a marketing campaign, you do all of that. You come out with your new website design for the campaign, you know, whatever it could be, the blog post, what's the social media post going to say? Honestly, the last big daunting thing that people are like, okay, how do we want to go about the video, right? Like, are we gonna get an outside agency? Are we gonna do it internally? Do we have the resources to do it internally? It's a big daunting task. But truly, I think the beauty of it is it's like anything else in life. It's an investment, right? Like, you have to, once you take your time on it and you go about it properly, you don't rush it, you don't force it, and you let this big behemoth of a project sort of take on its own life, what you end up with in the end is something that you're so proud to show off, right? And that's why we have, I mean, like for instance, for DigitalOcean, I would say you can't just be like, we want 10 or 20 video marketing campaigns this year. It doesn't work that way, right? That's not how video works. What you do is you think to yourself, okay, what are the main focuses this year? What are the customers that are worth telling? And let's just do it. First off, do we have the resources to pull it off? And let's just kind of go with it as it comes, as it's organic, because when you start to feel like you have to churn video, you're going to be way overworked. You're going to be exhausted, and it's not going to come out authentic. So basically, like, I think what I'm trying to say here is that like video work is huge and it's scary, but just go with it, right? It's just like riding on a boat. The waters are going to be choppy, but just forge ahead bravely. By the time you get there, it's going to be a totally rewarding experience, and it lasts forever, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, the returns on your investment, I mean, they're pretty huge. Other than that, I think uh, the whole process of video production has evolved over the last few years. Gone are the days where you need a large crew, and you'd have to invest $1 million in a campaign, like to produce one single ad for your TV commercial,
Right.
like a super ad or whatever, and then you'd have to buy airtime for it. Today, I mean, I was just talking to you about the ads from DigitalOcean that were thrown at me when we started
Yeah.
stalking people from DigitalOcean to be onboarded onto the podcast. And when that happened, it is pretty obvious. Like, I mean, it's easier to produce videos from today than they were earlier. It has gotten cheaper, to be very
Mhm.
honest. Your equipment today, you have a smartphone with you which can produce 4K, or I mean, some of them can produce even I think larger resolutions than that.
Right.
Other than that, you have the option to now reach audiences and target people that you really want to talk to. You don't have to go a nationwide commercial campaign. You can go to specific targeting groups, right? And sort of show them the messaging, and
Right.
you could possibly also diversify your messaging accordingly. So it is not always that it is difficult today. I mean, it's a matter of perception, because
Right.
traditionally people have seen brands producing those big ads, and just that being the use of video. Today video has crept into every single thing. Today we are doing a conversation on video. My colleagues are prospecting over videos. We are doing sales meetings over videos. We're doing team onboardings over video. I don't know, every single aspect. If you want to today create a FAQ section of about your product, you could do that over videos.
Yep.
Like, I don't see. I mean, the
Very easily too.
opportunity is endless, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Totally. And it's funny because like maybe when you think about those big video projects, they're evergreen in different types of ways than like what you're just talking about here. You can make a bunch of different versions. You can make basically video work for you on every single platform, right? So I'm sure that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast right now have probably experienced this, but you think to yourself, okay, well, we're going to make this giant video campaign. But how does that work for Facebook? How does that work for LinkedIn? How does that work for Twitter? You know, Snapchat, whatever you're using. And you do have to obviously like I think that's where it helps to have somebody who works in the production industry to sort of help what we would say like pick out the golden nuggets, right? Like let's just say you have this amazing video story, but you're not going to post a 5 to 10 minute production on Facebook and expect to get a huge return on it unless it's a incredibly nuanced audience that really is invested in it, and that's not really that
Yeah.
common, especially now if you're trying to reach a wider audience. So what you do is you look for what are those sound bites that my interviewee said that were 30 seconds long that were just amazing, and they really speak to what the core of this interview is about, and you make little mini produced videos out of those. You go into Premiere and you reformat your sequence to look like a phone screen, and then you make Instagram versions of those, and there's like all these different templated ways to make different versions of your videos as well, which we could also talk about. But yeah, I guess to your point, it's like how it's this marrying of the old traditional video production methods and the incredibly diverse current landscape of force multiplication of video. And I think it's incredibly exciting. It also poses an interesting challenge because it's how do we take one product and turn it into eight? And how do we make all eight engaging? It's fun.
Yeah.
It's actually really fun, I think. And it's fun because when you have a social media manager, like our social media manager is amazing. She would be the first to tell you, Adam, this video is not going to work on Twitter, but it will definitely work on LinkedIn. And we have to go back to the drawing board and be like, oh, okay, let's rework it. So it's like always figuring out a puzzle, but I enjoy
No,
it.
that's true. I think the power of repurposing content is huge. I think if you're able to produce content that will work, I mean, through a single campaign, you can produce content that work on all the platforms. I think you like you rightly said, you need somebody to think about it. What does that platform demand? What is the kind of consumption behavior on that platform? And then also sort of tweak your messaging maybe, or the format based on those needs. I think, like you said, there are the people who are I'm used to like sort of using templatized versions of videos. I think that is something which is a very bad behavior. I feel personally, in my opinion, I think using one single video across all medium, it never works. So it's very important that you sort of think on behalf of the audience and not from a brand person perspective, because you of course are obsessed with the brand, you work with it day in day out, but the other person is not there to learn about your brand. He or she is possibly there to connect with their friends or network with professionals,
Right.
depending on which platform you're talking about, and then suddenly you're throwing them an ad, and it has to sort of blend into their experience. So it's very
Yeah.
important that you break that myth.
I think you made a really interesting point there, which was about templatizing videos, which is something obviously I know, we wanted to talk about here, but I couldn't agree with you more that templatizing videos throughout platforms is a dangerous move
Yeah.
um, that a lot of people who, and it's to no fault of anyone's own, if they're not trained in video, they probably wouldn't see the harm in it. But like
Yeah.
since working in the past few years as working as a video professional, multiple companies, and with other colleagues in the industry, it's something that we've seen a lot, which is there's a bunch of new ways to make video almost look professional if you're not a
Mhm.
video professional. Like quick and easy ways to put in snippets of video and make it look like you're almost a video professional, but the ones who are can tell that it's not that good, right? I mean, quite frankly, sometimes it can look really good, but other times you run a real risk of making your content look cheap or inauthentic. So I'll be the first to admit that at DigitalOcean, on the video side, we often use templates if it's like a very complex After Effects motion graphic sort
Mhm.
of transition, right? Like maybe like a lower thirds on an interview or some sort of framing device. But
Yeah.
templates aren't meant to be used at face value, right? You have to kind of know how to manipulate them. Like, so we use a website called Motion Array. I don't know if you've ever heard of Motion Array, or if
Yeah.
your viewers have ever heard
Yeah.
of it. It's a fantastic site. It's actually really affordable too. Um, but they have an amazing library of templates, but they're really complex. And honestly, they're not always reliable because like they're all made by different graphic artists. So you'll see a lower thirds on there that you really want to use for this interview. You download it, you open it up in After Effects, and it's like, what am I looking at? Like, how did this person build this project? It makes no sense. Like, it's
Yeah.
like if you were to make a lower thirds in After Effects, it would look nothing like the way that this person did. So now you have to like fit their editing style and reverse engineer things and take it's just it's sometimes more effort than it's worth. And
Yeah.
the worry there is that somebody who isn't a video professional might go on Motion Array and see these templates and be like, oh man, I'm gonna make my videos look so good, and they're gonna download this and it's just gonna look crazy. You know what I mean? And so I think
Yeah.
there is a very big risk there. I think it's great that there's a bunch of more options for templatizing video productions for corporations, but I
Yeah.
would just really caution folks to not get too brazen with it, especially if it's just like somebody in the marketing team who's like, oh, I've been randomly assigned with making this video. Don't do that. Like get a second opinion, because your brand, it's one thing if it's a personal video and it's on your personal channel, fine, you can afford to take risks. But if this is a brand that's tightly protected and you're just
Yeah.
throwing in random templates that are not on brand at all, you
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
run the risk of doing damage to the aesthetic of your brand. So
True.
I would just exercise a lot of caution when doing that.
No,
Yeah.
I think I think I have a follow-on point to make to what you said. First of all, brilliantly put out there the point that the templatization. I think you also mentioned about the obsession or the compulsion of getting the video highly polished. I think the other obsession, which is similar to this behavior, is to sort of portray yourself as a brand, as a serious entity. That is something. I mean, like you just said, I mean, personal videos, you always go push your boundaries, you sort of experiment with humor and other things, and when it comes to the brand, you just become a very different person. I mean, most marketers just go into a very different zone, and they're like, okay, we are talking to CEOs and CXOs. These guys possibly would not like a certain kind of messaging, but I mean, the other person on the other side also is just someone who's out there. I mean, they have
Yeah.
their likes, dislikes. I think this is a myth that we've tried to discuss a bunch of times on the podcast. What is your perspective on
Yeah.
using humor or anything which challenges the status quo in a brand message?
So let me just make sure I understand your question. Your question is, how do I feel about messaging which challenges the status quo, or for a
Like
brand?
typically the myth has always been that you need to be a very serious communication. I mean, like a
Oh,
brand.
okay.
I mean, we cannot do certain things and we can do certain things. I mean, you
Okay.
don't set certain boundaries. That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking.
So great question. Great question. So I have kind of two answers, one of which ties back to what we just said, and the other which is kind of like a messaging perspective. When it comes to design and production and editing, I would say don't get too crazy with it. If you're new at video, if you know what you're doing and you have professional opinions there, don't be afraid to get bold and try new things. Just make sure you always tie it back to what your brand's understanding is. Like, um, for instance, at DigitalOcean, our brand is, we have a very fun brand. It's got interesting colors. It's almost sort of got like a texture, like the designs have sort of a textured, brushstroke, loose, fun aesthetic, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to work with. But if I was to, hire somebody to make a brand video for us and it came back super techy and there was all these, corporate sounding music in the background, you might think
about.
DigitalOcean as a cloud company, they would love this. We don't. It's cool that you tried that, but it doesn't work. On the flip side, and the flip side of that, when it comes to messaging, I think brands should be very bold, because bold messaging, you don't need all the video edits to make your messaging impactful, right? Like if you have both, that's fantastic. But some, like, you could have literally an incredible video campaign just be a bunch of different people looking at a camera saying one thing in cohesion, right? Like maybe it's something against, maybe it's like a brand, maybe it's like your brand's prerogative or ethos on a particular topic. Maybe it's about, human rights, or International Women's Day, which is coming up, something like that, right? And you don't
Yeah.
need fancy edits to get the point across if the messaging is strong. And I think strong and bold, clear messaging almost trumps video production
Yeah.
most of the time, because that's what people remember you by. People will see the great video editing and it'll tie everything together nicely. It'll make it flow better. It might enhance your message. But the message
Yeah.
is the part that really comes from the heart, and video edits can't fix that. So that's where the journalistic side comes in, right? That's where you need to make sure that what you're saying is clear, poignant, resonates to a wide audience. And I highly encourage people to, say the right thing, right? Don't say something that's like controversial, but also do be clear about who you are and who your brand is, because you also still as a company have a responsibility to stand out from your competitors. What makes you different? Why should your customers trust you, and why should they choose you? Say who you are, be bold about it, and make great products too to back it up.
Absolutely. I think we've spent quite some time in understanding how your brain functions and your approach towards video making. I would like to spend the next few minutes of our conversation in trying to break down some of the campaigns that you worked on.
Sure.
So the first one that I really want to talk about is a video that you made during your tenure at the United States Air Force, and this is the lyrics song. Uh, I'd like to play the song first before you can tell me a little bit more about it. But I think just because you already made that disclaimer for people who might have joined in a little later in the conversation, this is something that was done towards the start of your career, right?
22.
And yeah, so nobody here is going to judge the kind of production value that is in the video, but then I think the whole process of what made you produce something like this. So I'll play the video first, and then maybe you can talk a little bit more about it. So I'm just going to play a little part of it because it's a long video. It's a video which is over 3 minutes, but then I'm still going to play like a small snippet of it. So here goes.
If you've ever needed financial help at Osan Air Base, odds are you've seen Senior Airman Letitia Moss. Though you may not have been looking forward to that visit, her 2 cents may be the reason that you're looking forward to the next one.
She's compassionate, caring, driven.
Which could explain all of these.
She definitely is Moss Boss. Like, that's true to her name.
But it wasn't always this way. In fact, 3 years ago, Letitia was at the lowest point of her life. Her peaks were built off of flat lines.
She was adorable.
Her heaviest burden weighed just 4 pounds.
Lyric was her first name. Lyric Monroe. I actually have some pictures of her. She was a cute little girl.
Born with a heart condition, Lyric spent her 6 weeks undergoing multiple operations, attached to feeding tubes, which were unable to block her unwavering smile.
From day one, she was smiling. And that's what made me just fall in love so instantly, because I was like, oh, she's already smiling, you know. The morning that she passed away, I remember calling my job and just breaking down. And I said, you know, she passed away. And my leadership came up there and they stayed with us. And I just held her for hours. And the hospital staff let me do that because I guess, you know, it helps with coping.
A memory which she held so tightly that it began to take a hold of her.
When people are asking, you know, do you need anything? Are you okay? I would just say, I'm fine. When really I wasn't.
It's been 3 years.
It is such a touching video. I mean, I was planning to cut it short, but then I just couldn't, right? I didn't know where to stop. I still wanted to play through the entire video, but again, in the interest of time, we had to cut short. But if you could give us a little bit of a journey into the video, the messaging, and how you went about it.
Right. So this is actually an interesting example of how to find a story. And I just want to take a few minutes to talk about this, because I will probably talk about this for the rest of my video career to multiple people who want to learn video. So this, what you're seeing right here, was actually an exercise. This was a practice operation for video storytelling, where people from, it's called Defense Information School. It's in Maryland. It's basically the school for military journalism, had came out to Korea, and they picked a few journalists there, and we just did like a seminar kind of thing, right? And they did an exercise with us, which was genius, genuinely genius. Like, if I ever teach video someday, I will do the same exercise. And this was it. They basically were like, okay, we have called a bunch of different organizations around the base that we're currently at. And we've asked them where they think some interesting stories are. And we basically tracked down like 10 leads, right? And you're going to pick these leads out of a hat. And all of these have what would be stories at first, but you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that story. You need to find something else to tell about this person. You have 1 week to do it. Go. And so what had happened was I had picked Letitia, and she was airman of the year, which is basically like saying employee of the month, but for thousands of people on a base. It's actually really hard to do. I never earned it, that's for sure. And she was just an incredible worker, right?
Yeah.
And that, if you were, the whole point was like digging deeper, right? And this kind of goes back to the marketing side too, where, okay, so she was airman of the year. Great. Is that a story? No. And that happens on every base. Every base has an airman of the year sometime. That's not a story. Dig deeper.
Sure.
How did she get there? What motivated her? And then when I started to get to know Letitia over the course of a couple of days, I had found out that she had had a miscarriage, and it was very hard for her. And if we had kept watching that, you would actually find out it's not all sad. It just starts out kind of sad, well, very sad. But it goes to her finding meditation and becoming very good and practiced at meditation, and how she basically pulled herself out of the rut she was in using meditation. And because of that, being almost kicked out of the military to becoming airman of the year, how meditation was the conduit for her personal success, right? And that, I think, exercise says everything you need to know about finding videos, about finding good stories for your brand, because it's like I talked about earlier, right? We want to actually show how our customers use our product and connect with us. You would think, if you're sitting in that meeting, think about what that instructor said to me and what I said about marketers in meetings, right? Well, she won Airman of the Year. That's a story. Well, this customer spent the most money. That's a story. Neither of those are stories, right? Dig deeper. What got her there to be the best? What got this customer so motivated about their brand to try so hard to want to spend the most money? Why do they trust us that much? You know, what did we do for them? And that's kind of why I showed this piece.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail. I mean, where it was supposed to be, right? I mean, it's very difficult to sort of find the human side of customers, because I mean, most of the it's not the easier part to take, right? The easier route would be to just say that, hey, this is my story, this is what I've achieved, and uh, I mean, let's talk about it. But then I think going a step deeper into the why behind it, I think that unlocks the value of the story. So I think
Right.
great job there, first of all. And for people who might want to watch the video, we can definitely leave a link to the video in the comment or something like that. Uh, yeah. Other than that, I think you also spent some time after working with the Air Force. You also spent time with 2U, which is again an edtech
Hmm.
company. Um, Again, creating stories of uh, I think learning and students and things
Hmm.
like that. How's that experience? Because I think the whole category of learning tech has taken off after, I mean, especially in India,
Right.
has taken after the lockdown, uh, because I think traditionally people are used to like going to college or tuition that is offline. And today, or not today, if you track back to say 8 9 months prior to where we stand today, you had no access to campuses, you had no access to tutors, private tutors, and
Right.
people still had to go about doing their education. And this as a category flourished so quick that you see so many I think advertising campaigns that are happening, so many acquisitions that are happening in India in this whole
Yeah.
domain. So
Yeah.
it's mad, right? How what have your learnings been in this particular category of marketing learning tech?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that when I was working with 2U, I was doing what was basically curriculum videos for newly joining students, and it was selling them on. I mean, they were already part of the program, but it's basically getting them excited for the program that they're about to embark on. And what
Yeah.
2U does is they take masters, doctorates, and now currently bachelor's degrees of very prominent schools, and they put them online. Um, and you still have to show up like on time by a live stream with your professors, take tests in front of the professors. I mean, I did my first master's through 2U at Syracuse. Honestly, it was a great program and I loved it. So that said, what I had learned with them was very what I had learned with doing production with 2U is that you really have to be mindful of brands. I mean, that would have been obvious with the Air Force, but the military is such an established brand that it's not like you get a lot of flexibility there. I
Yeah.
had learned that this was my first job since being out of the Air Force, and I had learned that when handling different universities' brands, you had to be very mindful. It and you had to just be very delicate, I guess would be the right word I would use. I've never seen, you think about universities, right? Like the brand of Yale, the brand of Georgetown, right? Like these are all the brand of Berkeley, um, Cambridge. These are just like universities that are so old and so well known that you don't get to change anything, right? Like they look at it as like you, the video professional, are lucky that we're even letting you represent our brand because it is hundreds of years old and only the best people go here, right? It's very much like
It's
they have
almost
the
sacred.
final say. Yeah, and so it was like I would say that what I had learned from the marketing side of things was just like how to tread lightly, quite frankly, because people really care about their brands. And I think I hadn't experienced that as a civilian yet. And there had been multiple times where I had gotten my hand slapped, right? Because like maybe we didn't do an edit or we didn't show the right building in a shot or we didn't use the right typeface. That is not the university's approved typeface. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So that was kind of it was a learning experience to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. So I think I want to briefly move on to your experience with DigitalOcean now. I think it's been close to a year and a half. You joined about 6 months, 7 months pre-COVID. That's
Right.
what I'm assuming. So you've seen
Yep.
a part where possibly your strategy at DigitalOcean would have flipped the day pandemic hit, right? I mean, traditionally, DigitalOcean would have possibly commissioned a lot of campaigns in the past years, and they were executed in a very different manner. And all of a sudden, you had to go to remote shoots and whatnot. Like the entire place, I think even we worked with a lot of brands that sort of almost panicked when it came to like, hey, we had planned this campaign and this is something now that needs to go out, and we need to change our messaging, we need to change our processes, the ops, everything goes for a toss.
Right.
How did you like come out of that transition? What was that transition for you at DigitalOcean?
Right. So I would say that I mean, for anybody in video, it was kind of jarring at first, but it wasn't as bad as I expected. Like when I had first started at DigitalOcean a year and a half ago, and I live in Washington, D.C., and our headquarters is in New York City, I could easily take the train up there it takes a couple hours and do productions and interviews and get B-roll at HQ, right? And that opportunity was always there. And having that taken away, I would say it was hard when we needed to make videos that had good sound bites from employees or b-roll, but honestly when it came to marketing, I didn't find it all that tough. And the reason is because, again, the messaging never changes. Like if I was filming at HQ or I was trying to make a campaign remotely, the messaging isn't going to change. Really, it's the only thing that's making difficult is what we put on screen. That has been the most difficult part. But I think there's a couple lessons that could be pulled out of how to kind of make videos work while you're remote. It's stuff that I've personally learned during the time of COVID. There's perks and there's disadvantages. The perks to doing it this way, the perks to recording remotely, using things like StreamYard, doing Zoom interviews or using templates is that it's fast, it's obviously cost effective. And in 2021, it's actually kind of authentic because we're all experiencing this. Whereas in a pre-COVID world, I wouldn't want to say it makes you look low budget, but people might ask, why didn't you do this with a real camera? Whereas like now it's totally acceptable, right? And maybe it will stay acceptable for the remainder of human history. Who knows, right? But if I may, I wouldn't mind kind of just like for the listeners, kind of going over a few valuable lessons that I think could be pulled out of how to make the most of remote learning that I've learned in the past year, for sure. And one of those is going to be just kind of to make sure that your basic framing and lighting elements. I would say like one of the most difficult parts of doing remote production during COVID, and I'm sure it will forever continue to be a thing, and obviously you've probably experienced this as well, is that you have to play director remotely, and it's tough. It's no different than being on a real set, right? Like if somebody walks into a real set with cameras and a gaffer and a lighter, it's intimidating. They have to stand there and you're putting a microphone on them and you have to walk them through it and kind of chill them out a bit. It is no different remotely. And in some cases, I would argue that it's harder because, folks have their webcam set up all day and they're taking meetings and nobody's telling them there's anything wrong with their webcam shot. It's fine. I do it every day, right? But then when you're on video and you want to make sure they're framed properly and their lighting looks good, they're like, what do you mean? I do this all the time. And you're like, I know, trust me. And just work with me. One thing that I would encourage anyone to do if you need to do remote recording is to always reassure folks that you're trying to make them look as fantastic as possible. I personally say, don't worry, I'm just gonna make you look like a rock star. And people are like, okay, fine, no problem, right? Because it's like, I know this is annoying, I know it's a little tedious, but I promise you that if you work with me on this, you're gonna look so good that you're gonna wanna show this to your mom. And they're like, okay, fine, all right, fine. So like, it's just like, be loose and engaging. But a few other like technical lessons is to always make sure that the lighting is in front of the person's face. So many times you'll want to record someone and they'll have a window behind them and they look like a black silhouette. That's no bueno. Don't do that. And obviously, like the rule of thirds, I would assume that a lot of people viewing this probably know what the rule of thirds are, making sure that they're framed properly. I like to say two fingers above the head on the framing, which is kind of where I am trying to be now because I want to practice what I preach. And obviously a microphone. I think this is probably the hardest one for me because I don't know if anybody else has experienced watching this, but microphones are just hard to get people to commit to, right? Because like you'll say like, okay, you don't have to have a professional microphone, but even if it's just like an iPhone headphones that have a mic on them, that'll work. But then like still 50% of the time people will join and they just are using their built-in microphone, and it's like, oh my God, please don't do that. But it's just, this is just the struggles of filming remotely.
True.
Yeah, but those are a few of the things that I've learned. Oh, also I would say that learning After Effects could be very helpful for you.
Let's not even go there.
That's a whole other conversation though.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of, like, I think today we are not an agency setup anymore. We are a market network, and we're getting videos done globally. But back in the days when we were an agency production house setup, I'd get thrown a lot of resumes where you would see After Effects being thrown in the skills section, and then when you ask them to do something, it is like, okay.
Yeah. After Effects is a beast. Yeah.
That's yeah.
But yeah, and also just like, I think another thing too, I would just quickly point out. Oh, I also wanted to just say real quick, like what we use at DigitalOcean, which is working really well for us. It might be something that your viewers might want to consider. I promise this company is not paying me or anything to say this. It's just genuinely, I've had a very good experience with them. But we were trying to solve for how to record remotely. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, recording on Hangouts and Zoom, it doesn't work well for me. Like, it doesn't work well for us because you're always beholden to the connection of the call, right? Hangouts, Google Hangouts only records at 720p. And if your connection's bad, a poor connection 720 looks really bad. Plus, you know, your audio can skip. Zoom can go up to 1080, but you're still, again, beholden to the connection. And so we had been looking for solutions during COVID, as early as last June and July. I was just like, how can we improve these calls? Because you'll notice, actually, if we watch the Hub for Good Garden Collective piece, those interviews were done between the US and Portugal on Hangouts. And the story's really good, but quite frankly, the interview shots could be better. And it's just because that's the technology that we had. And so now we're using a tool called OpenReel. And what OpenReel does is it basically, you use their platform and you create a session, kind of like StreamYard, like what we're using now. And each person joins the call and you conduct the interview, except it makes you more of a director. So I'll start the call. I can change your depth of field, your lighting, and contrast. I can pull up a teleprompter that will come in real time in front of your face. But most importantly here is that the reason that I'm really enjoying this tool, and the reason that I hope more companies create things like this, because as far as I can tell, it's not a big market right now, is that when you record people, every single person on the call is a separate file that goes straight to StreamYard's cloud and renders there before you ever even get it. So no matter how bad the connection is, no matter if there's an audio drop or anything, the file will always come out perfect at its highest rendering capability. So they can record in 4K, it can record in 1080p. It's just made our videos a lot better. And then on the post-production side, that's a lot easier because, you know, if you record a Zoom call and there's multiple people, that file is what it is. You can't move those faces around after the fact. But when you have separate face recordings, you can pull those into Premiere and rearrange them however you want, right? Like, and it just gives you so much more editing capability. And I think post-COVID, we're going to see a lot more things like that. How can you make remote recording as close to professional as possible? And whatever companies get in on that are going to do very well for themselves, because that's the future, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. I think I'm glad you could shout out to OpenReel. I think we could tag them post the session and make sure that they know that their work and their product is being appreciated. So we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, it's just like, you know, you have problems, you need solutions, and some companies out there are doing them, and that has been one that's worked particularly well for us. So yeah, they deserve it.
Since you mentioned Garden Collective, a video that you made with somewhat old tools that were not available to you. I mean, the new
Google
ones.
Hangouts.
So we'll play that first, and then maybe we can play one after that to show a new this thing. So this is again a long video. I don't think so we can show the entire one. This is over 3 minutes, but then I'll just show a few seconds, and maybe you can tell me more about it.
Garden Collective is a collaboration between the four of us and loads of musicians and artists that we come into contact with. It was originally founded in Cork in Ireland before moving here, and we have always had a focus on live events, which include poetry, music, performance arts, kind of a whole range of things. And then with the outbreak of coronavirus, we had a festival planned, and we had to find a way to shift that online. And so we basically had to try and rapidly learn some digital stuff.
Because of the restrictions, it made us do it. You know, restrictions breed creativity.
None of us have any background in tech, so it was a very steep learning curve. But we essentially found a way to create a server, which is when I came across DigitalOcean, because we used it as an ingress server for the RTMP streams from individual artists. Those streams, we pulled them from the server into our streaming software, and then we streamed out from there, kind of a single thing. I kind of went off the recommendations of various articles online, but it's a very user-friendly platform, because I didn't feel scared of screwing anything up, because it does just kind of, you can just remove it and start again, and it worked pretty well.
Yeah. So I think also is proof to the point that you made earlier that they did not force feed DigitalOcean into the video.
Mm-mm.
It came out very naturally that they were struck with a adversity rather, and somehow they figured out their way, and then
Yeah.
the product then get that.
They were funny. They were fun. Yeah. But I think that's exactly, I mean, that just goes back to everything that we've been talking about, right? Like a user who was facing COVID, like all of us, who wanted to find a way to make their fellow artists still make money and thrive during COVID when it was so difficult. And so they came to DigitalOcean to build an online streaming, an online venue essentially. And their journey through that building process, I think that's the story, right? Like I really enjoy Eden's soundbite when he's like, so I spun up a droplet and had to figure out digital stuff, which is just like, it just goes to show that like these are real people, and I think on the DigitalOcean side, it's good for us because it shows that even if you're just starting, you know, our platform is easy enough that you could do it too, but don't take it from us, take it from these guys. They built a whole online venue really quickly post-COVID. So it's just like, it's very natural, you know?
Absolutely.
It was a ton of fun. Also, shout out to Gantry Creative in Salt Lake City who helped me edit that piece because I was a one-man team at the time. So,
Awesome. Would like to talk about one more example of a campaign that you all produced. Which one should we go?
I think so. That one was, I think the one that we just watched was very solving for COVID centric. I think the app platform one would be good because it's a lot more product centric.
Sure. I'll play the app platform.
Dear builders, we know that right now you're fueled by a dream. You're smart, fast, working on 8 things at once. On that next big app that's going to shape the future. But at DigitalOcean, we know that building, deploying, and managing your apps takes a lot more than just treading water. It especially when it comes to scaling. That's why we had to build App Platform, a fully managed solution that will help to get your app to market faster. We started with simplicity. What if deploying apps could be fun and fast, where you could deploy code from Git repos in just a few clicks? Not only would that be more productive, but it would mean I can focus on making my product better. We also focused on all the time suckers, provisioning and managing infrastructure, operating systems, databases, application runtimes. And we said, if App Platform could allow you to deploy code faster, think of all the amazing ideas that would be unlocked. And we know as you're watching this, you might wonder, is this really for me? Can I do this? Well, we're here to tell you the answer is yes. App Platform.
Yeah. So, let me first give you my opinion on the video before you tell me, because again, typically we've seen a lot of animated explainer videos especially in the B2B SaaS business, you see one every now and then. A lot of them focus strongly on the product and the UI and things that can be done inside of the product. Whereas this video was so refreshing that I would, even if you would mute this voiceover, I'd still watch it like a film because it was a story being told to me. I see somebody like going deep sea diving, and I can see some amazing visuals. The colors are so beautiful. Again, I get engaged on a very different note, and then you sort of slide in the brand message. So I think it's very smart, and a very few sort of brands like to experiment in this zone. We've had cases where Guch has helped a bunch of brands do amazing videos like these. Again, you need the person on the other side to be sort of also adventurous, I would say, because like I said, most of them are very they're like, okay, this is not what our brand is, but this is how we need to communicate. But then if you do something like this engages the audience on a very different level. So kudos to you guys, first of all, for pulling off some video like this. And yeah, I mean, tell me how, what kind of an impact has this video made for DigitalOcean?
Yeah, well, it's been our best performing video for quite a few months now, and the reception has been really nice, actually. When I look at the YouTube upload, there's a lot of comments from folks that are just like, honestly, I came here for the video. Like, I just like, one of the comments was, has anybody else just typed it in so they could rewatch this video, which is like really refreshing to hear, right? Because this is a product video. And I think when we first started ideating for this product, App Platform is a unique product in a portfolio because it kind of consolidates a lot of other features of DigitalOcean into one streamlined process. And we wanted to make the idea of using digital, like honestly, if we had to trim it down to its basics, it's the ability to make DigitalOcean just more easy and more bite-sized for more users. And we just wanted to show this. We had two options here, right? When you're ideating for something like this, to your point, do we just talk about what App Platform can do, or do we talk about the problems that it's solving for folks and try to contextualize that? And that's kind of the approach that we took here. That's why it's like, it starts out with her deep into the ocean, this dark sort of scary place, and she's gradually working her way through, and she's asking herself, like, I don't really know much about this, but can I do this? And like, yeah, it turns out I can do all of these things. And it's not just to these geniuses who work in the cloud that can do this. I can do this too. And by the end of it, you'll see when her submarine surfaces to the water and there's fireworks going off, it's just like, this is what you can achieve. We wanted to inspire people, right? So you want people to know that, yes, there's a new product, but this is what it solves for, and you can do it too. And an easier way to show that is a sort of a central narrative. And again, I mean, you can kind of see the parallels here, right? It all ties back to the storytelling element. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're approaching towards the end of the conversation. I think we've had an amazing conversation about you, your career, and the work that you've been involved with the different brands that you've worked with. I also believe that we as marketers or creators are strongly influenced by people around us, brands around us, and stories around us. So I like to keep this last section to also talk about like people or brands that really inspire you, people that you admire, their work that you admire. So I'd like to know from you, who are the people that you appreciate? If you want to give them a shout out, this would be a right time to do that.
Great. Yeah, I would give shout outs to folks who have inspired me to consistently challenge my storytelling and journalistic and production capabilities, so that maybe listeners here will listen to them as well and be inspired. The first one I would say would be Jad Abumrad. He is a host of a very popular podcast called Radiolab from WNYC in New York. I think it's an NPR station. And the best stories I've ever told, I think I'll never forget it. I remember the first episode of Radiolab I'd ever heard, and I needed to produce stories in a couple weeks' time, and they were massive stories, and I couldn't figure out how I wanted to tell them. And I listened to this Radiolab episode that my friend showed me, and it was like a light bulb went off. It was just like, oh my God, this is what I have to do. Because the way that Radiolab tells stories it is like a storytelling podcast, but I guess it is somewhat journalistic. They don't just get into the meat and potatoes. They're not just like, okay, this is what's going on. This is the story. They talk about how did we get there as the storytellers? What was our lead? What did our lead tell us we should look into? And then we kind of found this out. And then that led us to here. And this is our first guest. And it's just kind of like, it's like taking the hood off of the car for the story. It's not just the story. It's the context of how the story came to be. And they always do that. And I just think it paints such a cool holistic picture. So that's one. Another one I would say would be Steve Hartman. I'm sure nobody's ever heard of Steve Hartman, but he is an old journalist in like the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, I think, or maybe it was Wisconsin. I don't know, somewhere way up there and it's cold. But he was shown to me during trainings when I was in the Air Force, and he's kind of like, he's just like a very good traditional journalist. I find the best storytellers could make stories about anything captivating. This hand cream, the best storytellers would be able to make you cry about this, right? Like that, those are the best people. It's like you go pick someone on the street and I can turn it into a viral documentary. Those are the people that you want on your video marketing teams because they see the potential in everything. And Steve Hartman is one of those people. He just literally does a segment that's about nothing. It's just like find a person on the road, make you love them. That's basically what he does. And it's just incredible journalism. Yeah, I would say those are probably my two. Visual brand wise, I mean, this is going to sound like a cop out, but I love following Adobe. I mean, anything that Adobe puts out is just like really nice, but they also have all the tools and all the money to do so. But if you guys aren't like following Adobe on Instagram, you should, because the ads that they come out with, we've sent around in our team as inspiration. Like, oh, check out what they're doing. We should try this kind of thing. So
awesome. Yeah, I think with that, we come to an end to the conversation, and we would like to bring this episode to a very grateful end. I think I have a lot of gratitude for someone like you having spent so much time in the field of producing videos, today coming and sharing your insights and your stories and some of your campaigns with us. Just helps us understand how video producers like you approach the whole process and what is the way they think, more than the way they do, right? That's more important. I think you can get a lot of people to help you with the doing part, but then the thinking part is very, very important. With that said, thank you so much for taking time out and from your schedule and joining us on the episode. I hope we continue to be in touch and do a lot more work together. Yeah, you're a part of the Mad Over Videos community, so please hang around, contribute, share more insights as we learn and sort of collaborate with each other in future.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to talk about this stuff. I really appreciate you listening. So
thank you so much, Adam. So I'm signing off for this episode, but we'll be back with a new guest very, very soon. Until then, goodbye.
Take care.